Hello, everyone. It's Christine Marie Mason, your host for the Rose Woman podcast. I'm coming to you this week from Northern California in the Redwood Forest in my little cabin where I live when I'm not in an American Airlines lounge or working off my laptop in some cafe in some city between meetings. And can I tell you the difference between being with my tree allies and my plant friends and watching the sun drift into the windows and catch the light just so. There's moments of total glorious silent bliss being in this space. I've experienced it in other places, as many people have. Many people have enlightenment experiences in nature. And the more you're in nature, the more you're with the bird song, the more you're with the plants, and you can allow yourself to sink into the frequency of the natural world, you realize how fast we run over the natural embodiment frequency of humankind. That if you're moving faster than you can walk or faster than a horse, you're overriding the system that you were built for, and you move at a pace that you can no longer use your senses to take in your full surroundings as you go. And so the pace we move at kind of numbs us out and disconnects us from the earth. And I feel like at this time in human history, falling back in love with nature and falling back in love with the earth is one of the pathways to, basically to saving humankind on the planet, if you look at the climate science. So how do we fall in love with the earth? If you're ready for an emotional and moving panel conversation, I am going to share with you the last panel we did at the Sensing Woman event at the end of September with three remarkable women who come from a totally different perspective on what spiritual ecology and ecofeminism really means. The first is Nicole Casanova, and she has such a deep, incredible presence in the circle. She just was dropped into her base and so alive and real. I think you're going to really enjoy her wisdom. She's a great teacher. Lizzy, a musical artist and an activist who also speaks to female freedom and embodiment in her own way. And then Sophia, Huda, who represents a group out of New York that deals with environmental pollutants in women's bodies and in the products we purchase, and how we can activate to be more conscious that how we treat the earth and what we put on it and what we extract from it actually impacts our health directly in the products we purchase. So environmentalism, ecofeminism from a lot of different perspectives. And I think we get pretty choked up at a couple of points in the sheer beauty of the opportunity to live in these bodies on planet Earth and how we truly have been granted the Garden of Eden. And it's up to us to tend it and hold it as precious in all of our choices. While Sophia and Nicole are coming up and Lizzy, I want to invite you to just do a little scan of what happened today in your journey with Kelly and Gita and Louis and in the things that they were talking about. I was reminded of Nazim Hikmet's poem. Nazim Hikmet was a Turkish poet who wrote in the 50s and 60s, and he has a poem about the earth. He says, "This earth will grow cold one day, a star among stars. It's something like it's not like a cloud grows cold or a block of ice, but like an empty walnut rolling through space. And you have to grieve that right now in order to say that I have loved. You have to love the earth this much in order to really be alive, basically." And when I was watching the footage of the traversing of the ridge, of that beautiful ridge that he showed, and like this overwhelming feeling of love for the earth. That's what I think he was getting at, is how do you feel it and love it? Because from that love is sustainable activism. For the last panel, we are dropping down into earth, away from our own personal experience necessarily, to this ecosystem that sustains us, of which we are always a part, of which we are never separate, even when we think we're separate. And we have three very different perspectives, how we both activate and embody this connection to Gaia. Nicole Casanova is coming to us from Root to Heaven. She deals extensively with food and soil, sorry about the microphone, and she's going to be talking to us about her work. I met Lizzy through activation experience she held on the Big Island, where she dropped people deeply into their own bodies, their breaths, their sensuality, but also gave us, through her music, sends messages of healing the water is healing the women. Free bleeding on the earth is one of the lines in her songs. Just a whole experience of how do you reconnect to your body and doing it through music, and music is a form of activism. And Sophia Huda, who is working locally on climate justice through We Act, is deeply engaged in environmental toxins and what we put on our bodies and how we connect the body as earth. So we're going to hear three very different perspectives today. I'm going to kind of step aside and just make the transitions go. So Nicole, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I founded an organization called Root to Heaven. It is based on just a vision that I received from a prayer that I made in nature. And I just kind of was praying for my life, and I was praying for the world, and I was praying for the waters of the earth, because I was in the forest with all of these really young trees that were dying. And I had been sitting there for some time, and I felt the forest, and I felt the soil, and I felt a deep sense of oneness. And I just was asking, why are these trees dying? They're so young. And I just prayed, and I listened, and I sat, and I closed my eyes, and I meditated, and it started to rain, and it was a very peculiar rain, and I tasted the rain, and the rain was very salty, and I began to cry, and I realized the trees are dying because the soil is dying. And the soil is dying because the waters aren't pure. And within a moment, I had this vision of many nations and many colored people and many aged people coming together, and they were asking me for something. And I said, "What can I give you? How can I help you?" And they said, "Can you bring us trees?" And I said, "I don't understand." And they're like, "We need you to bring us trees because we carry prayers, and we carry traditions, and we carry sacred knowledge and science. And through our prayers together in ceremony with your trees, we can help to clarify, clean, purify, and free the waters of the earth." And this is where Root to Heaven came from. It was a vision that I received listening to the Spirit, but it's also an offering back to the Spirit, because we live in literally abundance, in beauty, and in love, in so many moments that there's so much magic in it, which was really great to come into this room when we were talking about Louis's work and his ability to take people through a journey and zero in on these moments that are always constantly happening under our feet. If we only just slow down enough to see the magic that's going on everywhere all of the time. So Root to Heaven focuses on 3 key initiatives: reforestation, rewilding, and regeneration. We're currently in a 5-year process called Family Tree, and our commitment is to plant 1 million indigenous plants all over the world within 5 years. Our first year was challenging. We were in a pandemic and a shutdown, so it was difficult, but we put 16,000 beings on the earth, and that felt really good, and that happened across 2 continents, and it was pretty successful. This year we planned on 100,000, and last week in Colorado we reached 130,000. So feeling really happy about that. We still have 2 major projects left this year. For me to be here and talk about the earth, talk about being a woman, it's one. there's no separation and there's no difference. And very akin to what was spoken in this room in the wisdom of sitting in circle and sharing our experience, which is always collective and never individual, is that what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. And what we do to ourselves, we do to the earth. And so Root to Heaven's family tree is very much about bringing people together to become conscious of their own power to be, to live, to breathe, to listen, to bring things to life, to bring things back to life, to compost what we don't need. And a lot of us have a lot of things we don't need. I'm composting my ideas like all day long. But that's really done through this process of regenerating soil, which is foundational. Anytime you want to reforest anything and develop ecology anywhere, you have to start from the ground up. If the soil isn't healthy, that plant that you plant there is going to die. And there's a lot of organizations, bless them, that are doing a lot of really beautiful work around planting trees. But we're not planting trees, we're planting ecology and entire ecosystems and regenerating communities and neighborhoods and families all over the world. And this is important because if we're just planting trees, we go back to that sense of the individual experience. And we're not. It's a collective experience, and this is what ecosystems teach us. They teach us about interdependent ecologies, all of the different plants, the mycorrhiza, the fungal biology, the shrubs, the fruits, the medicines, the wildlife, and every single actor has its part to play in the health of the overall ecosystem. And we are this way. In our own lives, we are an ecosystem. The right hand, the left hand, got to put them together. Otherwise, you're going to be at war with yourself. And that's why this is a really powerful mudra used across cultures and traditions for a very, very long time. And unification of the heart and the mind. These are all part of our inner ecosystem. And then it becomes the ecosystem of friendship and communities and jobs and organizations and working together and families and neighborhoods and whatever that it is, really understanding that the entire basis of an ecosystem is to empower the health of an individual plant. And the entire basis of the individual plant is to do what it does best to empower the ecosystem. And what does that take? Trust. Because if there's someone or one plant trying to do everything, it becomes invasive and it takes over. And that's really damaging. And we see that with monocultures and monocrops, what it's done to the soil. And that's not sustainable. And not only is it not sustainable, it degrades and it dismembers really important things. And this is what nature teaches us. And this is what's slowing down to pay attention to the reflection that's constantly happening in our lives shows us. So thank you for the invitation, Christine.
It's such a beautiful opening because, I mean, even this idea that you're planting an ecosystem instead of planting a forest or planting a tree, rather. What a beautiful shift in mind. Like I just have, that we're planting you're bringing all of that together. And then you said it was regeneration and rewilding.
Yes, regeneration, reforestation. So regeneration is the culture. Okay. It's a culture that understands we are far beyond the point of sustainability. We need to regenerate. We've taken too much. Now we have to rebuild. And this happens in our relationships too. And we see family dynamics breaking apart all over the planet, all over our cultures, all over our society. So how do we regenerate a person, an individual, to be able to be healthy enough to be close to someone else? This is what I've been working on.
Beautiful. Rewilding?
Rewilding. Animals will naturally come back when the ecosystem is healthy. That's just law. And once they're there, they're the ones that take care of the flow of the waters and the shape of rivers and streams and the spreading of the seeds and germination of things and pollination and cross-pollination. So,
okay. I think we're off to a good start. Thank you so much for that beautiful work. I'm so moved. I just want to hold that. I hear you making a lot of affirmative sounds, so.
You're in it. You're in it. You're in it. She's in it, y'all.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Lizzy?
That's beautiful. I love it. I love that the work, that type of work is being done is so intentional, and I love that you put this, you curated this with your team, and also asking these questions. I think these conversations are beautiful, and I feel very inspired just listening to, what you're doing. So thank you for that work. My name is Lizzy Jeff, and I am the rap priestess and Queen CEO of Zen and Kush and Zen and Kush Records. And what I was able to do was take my lifestyle and turn it into this beautiful brand, this beautiful community. This is just what we envision for the new earth reality. I basically went on a mission to connect with all of the most powerful people in this generation who are doing different things, different levels of activism, and creating these spaces, these intentional spaces to connect, to share ideas, to inspire each other through music, through art, through sensuality, and remembering the connection to our bodies. And one of my favorite, ways to express this vision, because there's so many different layers to what we're doing and what we're creating. But as a woman, showing up as a woman in, our society, I have these various interesting experiences. And so through my experiences, I've created this vibration of uplifting women and speaking life into women and celebrating women and honoring the power of our wombs and the power of our breasts and our nipples, and celebrating our nipples, celebrating our bodies, and all the beautiful things that come with it. And so, as Christine mentioned earlier, we first connected at the Hawaii Tantra Fest, and she got to experience the workshops that we curate. And really, it's just about us going to different communities. And when I learn about people like Nicole and what she's doing, and Christine and what she's doing, then it's my intention on how can I share this with my community? How can I create a celebration of all of our gifts? How can I create a space where the botanists, the alchemists, the farmers, the priestesses, the warriors, the mothers can come together in a space that's very intentional, that's fly. It's infused with fashion and all the cool things that come with the culture, but very rooted in deep spirituality and the rituals. It's about bringing the rituals in creative ways to share with people, showing people that this lifestyle is possible and you can live this life every day. And one of the things that Christine mentioned is the free bleeding. And that is something that I've spoken on in my music. We share in workshops and various things like that, bringing back this narrative in women free bleeding on the earth and reestablishing our connection to the earth, barefoot on the earth, bleeding, and really coming to a place where we honor our cycles. And so that's a big part of the work, is just reminding us of just how powerful it all is, and the magic of harnessing the feminine essence, that feminine energy to literally change the planet? What if 1 million women, love themselves deeply? And what if 10 million women, 1 billion, what if every day a different woman was activated, in her body, in her power, in her confidence? And I'm just having fun with it, you feel me? And the music is reflective of that. And later this evening, we will be curating a live experience for you to come and celebrate all of these things and connect with the community, connect with my community, and as you would say, close the gaps or bridge the gaps and create these bridges. And so that's my intention in just being part of these conversations. And based on the things that I'm learning and being inspired by, we go and we put it in this beautiful curated experience for us to all laugh about it, cry about it, heal through it, work through it, but stay connected in the community through it. So I appreciate y'all for having me and, sharing your space with me.
Hi, Sophia.
Hi, my name is Sophia Huda. I work for We Act for Environmental Justice. So We Act has been operating in Harlem for over 30 years, fighting for environmental justice issues there, the local level, and now also at the state and federal level. I'm the toxic specialist at We Act. I manage their Beauty Inside Out campaign, and that campaign is directed at sort of shining a light on toxic chemicals in beauty and personal care products marketed to women of color. And so part of this campaign, we're testing products. We also do surveys and education and outreach. And so we completed adult surveys where we surveyed roughly 300 adult women in northern Manhattan, women of color, about their use of beauty products. And something we found and something we know already is that a lot of use of these beauty products such as hair relaxers and skin lighteners are driven by issues like colorism, especially. Black women and Latino women now are some of the biggest consumers of beauty products in the U.S. and continue to grow. But the beauty products for them, such as hair relaxers and skin lighteners, contain some of the most toxic products, toxic chemicals in there. Something we found out from our surveys was also that a lot of women choose to use these products not necessarily because they themselves want to use them, but because they perceive others to think that lighter skin or relaxed hair is more professional, is more beautiful, indicates that they're wealthier, etc. The issue here is that people are using beauty products that are dangerous for them, not because of how others perceive them. And this is something we are trying to address, but it's a very big issue to address. And then, as well, the regulation of chemicals in beauty products, and so that's basically what we deal with. It's a big topic. It's a lot to work on, but it's really important. And the education and outreach aspect, especially, because a lot of people don't know about the chemicals in their personal care products. And they don't understand the impact it can have. And some of these impacts are on your reproductive health. It can lead to uterine fibroids, even to breast cancer, ovarian cysts, early puberty, and other things like that. And then you combine the environmental justice aspect of it, that many women, people of color who are using these especially toxic chemicals also live in toxic communities where air pollution is high. Unfortunately, water pollution is high. And so the cumulative impacts of being exposed to all these chemicals is obviously very severe, and it's a burden bared by one sector of the population, and so this is it ties into this conversation ties into environmental justice, but also health, environmental health, and other aspects such as why are you using these products, from a personal and a perspective and a social perspective. Why do you feel compelled to use hair relaxers? Why do you feel compelled to use something like skin lighteners? And how can we use the education and outreach to help people change their attitudes towards using certain beauty products? You should always use a personal care beauty product because you want to, not because you think society has to, you have to look a certain way to fit in or to get a job or to be respected.
This is one of the reasons I love these kind of collision spaces, is because you can see right off the bat that if you're putting toxic product on your hair, it's washing into the soil and it's impeding the whole system. And you can see that if you loved yourself head to toe, you wouldn't be doing those things to yourself. So there's just such a beautiful interaction already around that stuff. I'd love to explore that connection between self-love and the environment for a moment. Maybe we can go in reverse order, or just anybody who has a strong pull to answer that question between how does the relationship to self-love impact the larger environment?
Well, I think there's to attack it on two levels. There's one problem is that often, especially if you live in urban, in a city, in an urban center, you don't think that you're attached to nature. We have this idea of nature being something that's pristine, that is just rivers and trees, and it doesn't include buildings, it doesn't include people, and that's not true. When you live in a city, you are connected to nature and the natural ecosystem just as much as if you're connected to if you live in a rural setting. The only connection to if all you ever see is a tree or you go to a park, it doesn't mean that you're not someone who likes nature, that you don't enjoy the outdoors. Whereas we always say, well, you have to, go camping. You have to go all the way to Yosemite Park or a national park to really be in touch with nature. You have to go hiking on the weekend. Not at all. And so, because of that disconnect and because people who live in cities, which is the majority of people, don't think about that, they don't think about the impact what they put on or what they consume can have on the ecosystem. So to give an example, perhaps you've heard about the toxic chemical PFAS, which is used in a lot of consumer products. It's also used in beauty products, right? No doubt that the use in beauty products also goes into the water. It's already in our water from industrial activities as well. And so if people were more aware of that, if people understood that better, they might, start to question, why is this in my beauty product? Do I really need it or not? Can I demand better? And, it's important that regulation of cosmetic products, which are severely underregulated in the U.S., in fact, next to no regulation for cosmetic products, it's important that there be that framework, that it's in place and that chemicals are regulated, but it takes a long time for a variety of reasons. And so in the interim, it's really important that consumers understand and that they can demand better, because they're just as powerful a force as making better regulation. If that disconnect between understanding that we are part of a natural ecosystem no matter where we live, and that everything that we do has an impact on that natural ecosystem, would help people better understand the impact of using toxic chemicals and products that also harm the earth.
May I ask you a quick question? When you said if enough people demand, then we could see change. Just based on your experience and your research and knowledge, how many people would that take to even get the attention? Is that's one person can make a difference? But how many on a global scale would you say are needed to activate change from a brand to get their attention to shift the products, the ingredients in the products?
Well, we're already kind of seeing that. There's, for example, Sephora is a retailer, as a retailer, and there's a lot of retailers, not just Sephora, Target as well, others like Rite Aid, etc. They are actually making an effort to ensure that products with toxic chemicals are not sold on their shelves. And part of this is actually an effort of one of our partners called Mind the Store, and you can check them out. A little plug there. You can check them out. But it's basically, the idea is that money talks, and so if enough of a consumer base starts to voice something, they'll start to see that they have to do something. Sometimes that something is just what we call greenwashing, and sometimes it's a significant change. I couldn't put a number on it, but if it starts to make them worried about their bottom line, if the voices are strong enough, then it will definitely make a difference.
We don't realize how much power we have to vote with our dollar and to divest. Money does talk. And so, kind of like riffing off of what you're saying, Sophie, and then maybe even going a little bit deeper into what you began with, which is, just because I don't live in a forest doesn't mean I'm not part of nature. Because I think that we impose all kinds of things on each other and ourselves and nature and our partners and all kinds of environments that we exist in and we live in. And I think that, to your question, Christine, that's where there's a really interesting inner reflection of how are my actions impacting the environment. Because then it doesn't become about the outside. It becomes about your immediate circle and how you're moving inside of the spaces that you live in and you participate in every day, and how that influences what's happening around you and how other people feel and how you feel. Right? Because those impositions also affect our own ability to be with ourselves in a way that's actually healthy, and the things that we take in and that we bring in to our own psyche, to our own thoughts, to our meditations, our visualizations, which are fundamentally our prayers. And then how is our life living itself based on all of that? So I think there is a really beautiful way that we can look at what are we voting on with our dollars, and if a dollar is just energy, right? It says 100 pennies, that's $1, that's our energy. But what happens when we think about something 100 times and it starts to affect our self, our heart, our ability to see, our ability to connect or not connect, our challenges with intimacy or hypersexuality or whatever it is that we're getting involved in, that we are allowing for this thought or this product to be imposed into our environment and into our practice.
I mean, how I look at it as an artist, as a creative, they say something like, it's our job as artists to paint a picture of what was going on in the culture during that time. And part of painting that picture is always infusing pieces of inspiration to elevate our lifestyle. And it sounds like if we could elevate our lifestyle and make better choices for the things that we're consuming, then we could literally regenerate. And so with the self-love element, it's important to remind each other to, have rituals and that we're beautiful and to celebrate our wins. And I believe that it's really about the vibe and how we're showing up for each other and being able to show up for each other by showing up for ourselves first. And we do have a lot of work to do. And I see a lot of shift happening in small pockets of the planet, and I think it's beautiful. And right now, there's this movement, this self-love, this soft life movement, and it's beautiful and a big, this inspiration that's flowing through right now for women to kick back, chill, live a soft life, travel, experience luxury, love on ourselves, sunbathe topless, on a beach somewhere. And, I think that part of the work in whole is all of this work. And at the base of it, how do you feel first when you see yourself in the mirror? Like when it's just you and you, what type of thoughts are coming through? And a lot of those thoughts are oftentimes not our own beliefs. There's a lot of people spending money on advertising just to make us feel a certain way about ourselves. And even if you may not always pay attention to those things, it's always coming at you in so many different directions. And so we have to, be just as intentional with protecting our mindset, protecting our self-confidence, and practicing mirror work, and, taking baths and blessing our skin in luxurious hemp seed and jojoba oil and all the things that come with, self-love. And part of self-love is our shadow work as well. And, being able to move through that. So ultimately, I think that if we continue to show up for ourselves, inspire people, inspire our girlfriends to take a night off, to go pick up the new Rose vibration toy, just inspiring each other to tap into various, realms of self-love, I think, is a start for us to do within our communities and within ourselves.
I'm having like myth busting moments, which is that a hard, fast life is a better life. A life with more is a better life. Yeah, this whole soft life movement is also dropping into the awareness that every thought has an energetic imprint and an echo. And so the first myth is soft life. The other one, did you know the carbon footprint was the invention of the oil and gas industry? That they did not want to move to a clean grid, clean cars. So instead of having a collective solution to some of our environmental problems, they got a PR firm to design the carbon footprint and make you responsible as an individual for the anxiety for your short shower, for you not to drive as many miles. So we have this, in the absence of a collective field solution, we are getting the responsibility on the individual. And as you drop more and more, so you go and you eat as clean as you can, and you use as clean beauty products as you can, and you consume as little as you can, but you're still inside of a system that requires a field awareness solution. So there's this, and that was also the same thing with reduce, reuse, recycle. Instead of saying we're going to create a sustainable, cradle-to-cradle, circular, regenerative making production system, we're going to put it on you to figure out what to do with the trash. And so there's something in when you start to look at, oh, wow, it's not just individual. If I get together with Sophia and we start having this conversation, then we can create a field that moves the field at the upper level and shifts it for everybody at once. So that's one. Second myth is that you can reduce, reuse, recycle your way to saving climate or saving humanity without the collaboration of all the other beings. And then the third myth that came up for me during this is Robert Kennedy's commentary that while we love our national parks, and some people consider them America's best idea, national park of that scale, that in some ways the national park was America's worst idea because it desacralized the pocket park. It desacralized the tree on the corner or the little bird that's coming to we call them Taco Bell birds, the birds that like live at Taco Bell instead of like flying off into the forest because there's a guaranteed fragments of burrito. So you're touching on really major myths that are in the system and live in our bodies. So just thanking you for that. You were in Brooklyn, weren't you? At one point you were doing food. I mean, there's also this piece of the food, the farm to your body kind of piece.
Yeah, I live it every day. So I went to school actually a few blocks from here at the New School and I studied food justice and food sovereignty and environmental economics and psychology. because I saw this puzzle in front of all of us. And in war, the first act of war is to seize the gods and to seize the food system. And I wanted to understand why. And when I started to understand why, I said, well, maybe we give people back their food as an act of peace. Because if a population can feed itself, then there's going to be less crime and less comparison and less scarcity and less need to do shady things, and to also empower oneself. Fine, you want to give me reduce, reuse, recycle. Fine. I'm a highly creative person, so I will. And I'm going to get together with other highly creative people, and we're going to come collectively with like something that's going to blow this thing out of the field. And it's not going to be yours anymore because you didn't want to take care of it, but we will. And all of a sudden there are really beautiful projects and people coming together to find solutions and to find a voice and to protect. And that's really one of the primary roles of a woman, is that sense of protection of life, to protect, to care. And Dr. Kelly was talking about this in the last circle, but to care, to hold space, which means that, you know, for us, you know, regenerating soil, even if you're going to plant tomatoes or cucumbers, that thing needs to be alive. Otherwise, you're going to have like a cucumber that's this big, and that's like a pickle or something. But anyway, you know, we have to really look at what's happening, and then instead of asking other people to change, let's just change. Let's just take care of it, and it doesn't have to be a discussion, because there's a lot of people that like to sit in a lot of rooms and talk, but what are they actually doing? So food is about doing. It's about touching the earth, and it's about getting involved, and it's about being really humble, because the fact of the matter is that some seasons are difficult. You know, sometimes it takes years to figure the thing out, and then sometimes you figure it out and you start to produce, but it's not enough. And then other times you just find that flow, because you start to realize that it's not about force, but listening. And you listen to the earth, and you listen to the cycles of the soil and the moon and the rains and the waters and the seasons, and you start to understand what grows well together and what works well together, and what makes the ecology of the soil stronger, and what makes a community stronger that can feed themselves, that doesn't have to work a crazy amount of time outside to make money, to pay their rent, to buy their food, to da-da-da-da, to be in this hamster wheel where the real human spirit can never fully be realized or even explored. And so food justice for me was about, and is about, bringing food back to the people, because through that relationship, that real intimacy with the earth, with patience, which in Spanish, the word patience is said paciencia, which is broken into two words, paz y ciencia, peace and science. So there's a science of peace when you slow down, and this is what food teaches us, the reproduction of food. So bringing people into intimacy with their food, with the earth, with that work, what is actually happening. And then something really special happens, because the archetypal, ancestral energy and remembering returns. And the seeds and the harvests teach us about our deities again. So this was where we were coming from with food justice, and for bringing food ecology into all of the projects that Root to Heaven is doing. So we are not just planting trees or even a forest, but what can we garden? What agroforestry can we do? How can we feed a population? How can we feed the wildlife that's there? Because human families aren't the only families. There's animal families. We see the polar bears just struggling on the icebergs, looking for food. They have nowhere to live. Why? Because we need what? Why? And this goes back to self-love and decisions, because self-love is about the individual, until you penetrate that the self is connected to the all. And for us, this is what food is about. It's a higher offering to all of us to have food to eat so that we can be in plenty and begin to access our creative power and our human potential.
I just want to hold that for a minute. That's amazing. Paciencia, the science of peace. It's gorgeous. And when I'm reflecting on all of the goddesses that are pre-Christian, pre-Abrahamic, and it's Demeter, it's the goddess of the harvest, and sort of what you're saying is let the food come back and be in touch with the natural cycles, and you'll again feel the power of that type of deity.
Working with the Father God, the Sun, working with the spirits of the rain, the breezes, the animals and the spirits that they bring. It's just, that's where the deity, that's where the spirit and the mystery begins to really speak to us, and it's undeniable.
Thank you so much.
When is your next workshop?
It's actually after this panel.
Okay, that's something. You're based here?
We're in the Catskills.
Okay.
You were here in the city, and now are you coming back and forth quite a bit?
I only started coming back and forth maybe 2 months ago, but I've been here every other day ever since that happened. So
it's an important message, and it ties right into what Sophia is saying. Is if you can infuse a little bit of Demeter and Father Sky into Harlem with her,
definitely,
you've got some new magic. It's beautiful. I'd love to just start doing questions from you guys.
Hi. My question's probably mostly for Nicole, but I have been holding on to this dichotomy of feeling terrible about the hundreds of red lantern flies that I've killed, because I've been told it's my civic duty and that they're destroying America. And I would love to know anybody's thoughts on that, just especially from a spiritual standpoint, while also trying to protect the nature that the only trees in New York, and just love to hear your opinions on that.
And just for anybody who's not from New York, who's listening out there are these beautiful moths that have infested part of New York. They've come in what you called invasive species mode, and locals have been told to stomp on them if they see them. It's actually very violent to witness. People have so much untapped rage that they see one and they're like, oh, I'm crushing the glass at a Jewish wedding, stomp on it for real, full body stomp. Anyway, so as a preface to your response.
I want to open that response to Lizzy and Sophie too. I obviously have a lot to say, but we all have wisdom, and we all feel each other, and we feel life, and we feel things, and that's why you've been holding it, and now you're getting it out, which is a really important part of healing and witnessing. So I'm curious about what you have to say as people that are living in New York full time right now, which I'm not.
I think it's kind of strange they call it a civic duty to exterminate them. I don't know what the actual damage would be if they festered. Yeah, it's just a reflection of the fact that we often meddle with the ecosystem without understanding that its design is much smarter than humans will ever be. And so this is just a symptom of that. There's far greater symptoms out there. I'm not sure how they came to New York or why there's so many here, but in most environmental solutions, there's this sort of hubris or ego on our behalf of thinking that we can manage or control an ecosystem that we never designed to begin with. We don't even understand all of its complexity yet, and so something like that is a symptom of that. But better that than them releasing a whole bunch of other predators to balance that out, because that never ends well.
I'll give this one a shot too. I mean, definitely the design of nature is far beyond our understanding, and every place has its intelligence. It has a biome, microbiome, just like our bodies. So when we work with rehabilitating ecosystems, we really study place. Place also includes people. And we work with a lot of the grandparents, the grandmothers, the grandfathers who hold that thousands of years mouth to ear knowledge about how plants and animals work well together. But I want to give this concept that we work with sometimes when we have an invasive species come in is not necessarily to introduce another species or apex predator, but maybe there's something else that they can eat. And maybe we can look at solutions that way so that there's not like a murder or mass massacre. But also, sometimes these things happen. There have been blights and all kinds of things. And at a certain moment, you're like, well, do I want the tree or do I want these bugs? So it's a question. But if you're feeling out of balance about it, it's because that's your intuition speaking to you. And maybe a better use of the energy rather than feeling not great is to find, what do these moths like to eat that isn't these trees? And then maybe there's a campaign that can happen around educating people. You don't actually have to massacre 10 moths today. We can just put this fruit out or blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So there's always solutions. We just can't let other people impose our actions or the solutions that they've come up with on us.
And honoring your heart of nonviolence, because that's what I'm hearing.
Definitely.
So I was talking about earthing and grounding my own body and that magnetic field that I've felt since doing that. So I wondered if you could speak to it or had any thoughts about that, because the generation of how much we can love Mother Nature by really being in the earth with bare feet has been transforming for me. And I think that original love of alignment can bring so much more energy to the world and to all the things that you're all speaking of.
I'm so happy for your journey. I love that you can share that story. You can come back. Where did you say you just left?
I was in Colombia.
Colombia.
With indigenous people. And then afterwards, I was sent all these videos. They just kept on coming to me about what I can do in my own backyard. And so people going within the parks right next to them, it discusses all the things you've been discussing, can be very transforming because it's really aligning.
Yes, that's beautiful. Yeah, you definitely feel that shift in your energy. And, I feel having your feet in the ground, having your toes in the dirt, is just something about the spiritual, energetic connection to the earth that does recharge us. And it's a very indigenous, it's a very organic and natural way for us to exist. There's some certain communities in different cities where people walk barefoot, even just to tap into that energy. And going to, a tree, a nature place, the river, you went to Colombia, or your backyard. And, like you said earlier, just because we're not in the forest, we're not disconnected from nature. And I think that's beautiful, keeping your body to the earth, allowing yourself to connect and feel. There's so many different channels and cords that from the roots of different trees and plants that are activated beneath the core. It's, just divinations, Akashic inspiration that's coming through from having that connection. And I do think that is something that we should normalize, being connected to the earth. And earlier I mentioned the act of free bleeding. And some people free bleed lying down, some people free bleed lying on the side or on your feet, squatted, and just allowing your beautiful, witchy, enchanted blood to drip back into the earth. And I think that combination in itself is very powerful for those of us that are bleeding. But like I said, I love that for you. And How many of us put our feet on the earth regularly? Okay, because this is a room full of enchanted women. That's beautiful. Yeah, well, let's keep it going. It's a movement.
Also, just in case you're in the wintertime, the hands work just as well. You can go up and lay hands on a tree in the middle of a New York winter and get the same conductivity. So
and take a deep breath.
Yeah, take a deep breath.
But also we have a lot of agency in designing and co-designing spaces that we're not really stepping into that.
Yes.
Because the power of creativity is I see the vision. Okay, great. Who do I need to talk to bring this together? Why do we need 15 empty high-rises on Greenpoint's waterfront that nobody lives in? Maybe we just need a place where people can go and lie down in the soil and touch a tree that hasn't been peed on by a dog or, whatever that it is, but that's really for cultivating human intimacy and connection with nature, which ultimately is with self.
Can I share one thing? You made me think of, there's these different farmers. There's Free Haven Farms in Florida, and there's Gardening with Goo, and just these really dope brothers who they basically bring gardening to the hood, and they're because earlier you were speaking on bringing the food back, bringing it back to the people, and listening to you, I just thought about them because they are, teaching the youth how to even garden, and I think just as important it is to put our feet in the ground and touch the trees, having a sustainable, consistent relationship with planting, with nurturing, and watering. And even that is that energy that you spoke on when we place our hands on the tree, nurturing those relationships, which I think will in turn elevate our relationships with ourselves, with each other, but especially with the earth. And so, those were some shameless plugs as well.
Urban farm. Questions?
Something that your question has reminded me of, and it's a person and in a book and an organization that I think everyone here would really appreciate knowing about if you don't. But there is a multidisciplinary artist by the name of Kirsha Keshala who currently lives in Tasmania, and she was noticing her work is very aligned with Christine's mission and the reasons that we are all here, but she was also disturbed by these political national campaigns in Tasmania that were encouraging people to sort of do the same with these invasive species, and she commissioned all of the best chefs across Australia and Tasmania to create recipes using all of the invasive species. And the book is called Eat the Problem. And it combines sort of what you're saying about food and what you're saying about luxury and self-care and what you're saying about, tending to our communities in a very direct way. And it was very controversial because there was backlash that by spreading the word of actually constructively dealing with invasive species, she was threatening the systems in place, like wildlife and fisheries agencies that were already sort of in a very, kind of masculine dominant way, just stomp them out. And what she does with all of the profits of this gorgeous book is that she used it to fund the Material Institute, which is in New Orleans, which is training all sorts of children and youth to know how to grow food in their urban environment and kind of close that loop. So I just wanted to share that book with you, which you would find interesting, and it's just another like-minded person who's weaving together a lot of what you all are also working so well to.
Mm-hmm. So we'll include the links to that in the recaps and the show notes.
Hey, beautiful women. Good job. I also just feel compelled to jump into this conversation because my partner and I were walking down the street, and we had like heard the whispers of this, you know, just getting back to the city. And we saw one, and he was like, babe, we should just ask them what they need. We should just have a conversation and like really tune in and ask, like, why are you here? What do you need? And I find so often that I'm one of those really lucky women that my partner is teaching me a lot about softening. And having grown up in the city, it's a wonderful journey to actually remember how soft we can be. And especially with things like this, it's like, you know, there's always going to be a story that the news is wanting to tell us. And then there's also always going to be a reality that we can create despite that. I guess to throw it back to the speakers, a question then kind of just a la minute spurring from there is, where do you derive your inspiration or knowing of how to walk into the future in an empowered way?
I want to just touch upon something you just said first before anyone jumps in, which is, what do you need? What is this work here to do, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what are we talking about? We're talking about intimacy, right? So whether it's a moth that's invading New York City or whether it's a feeling that comes up that we ignore, instead of just stopping and saying, what do you need? I see you. Because we're so afraid to witness all of the parts of ourselves. And so what happens when we start to witness all of the parts of ourselves, then we can integrate others and moths on the street in New York City. And I just want to say that, and then I want to just leave the floor open to answer the real question.
All right. Well, I guess I get my inspiration to do my work in the environmental field from the fact that a lot of environmental issues, I mean, nowadays there's a lot of doom and gloom about it, and I strongly disagree. I think that in past years we've made great advances in quality of life. For example, more people have access to clean water around the world today than they did, for example, 20 years ago. We don't celebrate these things. We don't celebrate advances in research and technology and understanding that help us to address a lot of environmental issues. Rather, we go straight to the negative. And for me, there's quite a few issues that are, actually not that complex to solve. And if more people understood, if they were better educated about this, if they were better informed, then we could get to those solutions. And so I'm also a part-time teacher, and that's what I try to bring into my class when I do this work with We Act as well, is to tell people it's not insurmountable. It's not something to go and start complaining about and being pessimistic about. There's a lot that you as an individual can do. There's a lot that you as a society, as a voter, as someone who's active in your community can do. And so to not listen to those negative voices and to better understand where you can make a difference and how we can address some of these issues. And I find often with my students, with talking with others, that when I start to explain some of these issues, like you were talking about in terms of the reuse and recycle and managing, for example, waste and packaging waste and things like that, when I explain to them, the realities of how to actually address this, people start to be like, oh, okay, it's not like how it's described, and these are actually really practical ways we can reduce the amount of waste that is in landfill. I also like that you brought up this whole strategy to put the blame on the individual rather than the structure or people who the actors that actually caused the problems in the first place. And I think that's really important. And since there's such a gap in that kind of information and education, I feel optimistic that teaching people more about this will help us move forward.
So you said, where do you derive your inspiration to step into your future so empowered? That was a dope question. I was actually raised by my grandmother and my great-grandmother And both of those women were born in the South in the early 1900s. And it was a very different time for them during that time. And just hearing their stories and the experiences and the things that they overcame and just the dreams that they have for their lives and the sacrifices that they made with the vision of me being able to step into that. That's one part of it that I do want to acknowledge, because knowing that I come from a bloodline of beautiful, powerful, resilient, just medicine women is inspiration. And I know that they walk with me on my path, especially in different rooms and spaces that I might go where I might not always feel heard or seen, And so you said showing up empowered. I get to navigate through different spaces and different communities and different places and have conversations about our bodies and free bleeding and social justice and sensuality and women's sexuality and music and art. And I get to show up in my truth, wearing what I want to wear, speaking my truths and sharing and showing up fully, unapologetically. And that's inspiration. I find inspiration in being able to, have conversations with brilliant people. I find inspiration in all this dope pussy art, all this womb art, all this magical vagina, creativity. It's just, we're in a portal. I feel inspired by music. I feel inspired when I'm hanging with my homegirls, chilling, you feel me, at the spa. I feel inspired when I drink a fresh coconut. And so there's a lot of things that inspire me, the history and the path, the women, like I said, and the men that paved the path before me. And every day that I get to wake up and take a deep breath, you feel me, that's another opportunity to be a better, doper, more confident, more inspired version of myself. It's a new day. It's a fresh start. It's another opportunity to speak up for somebody, to create opportunities and share, resources and connect with people. So life in itself and all of the beautiful things that has come with my experience is where I derive my inspiration to step boldly in my power.
I also have to acknowledge my family, my parents as leaders of their community. My great-grandmother was the first woman mayor in Rio Piedras, Puerto Rico, when that just is not a thing that happened. And she worked a lot with plants, and she was deeply spiritual, and she worked a lot with women's rights, actually. And in dreams, she's come to me and she said, don't be afraid to stand in the rooms that I stood in. And this year, my older brother, he passed away 8 years ago, but this year he became my ancestor. And so it's this connection with that ancestral prayer for life that really gives me a lot of energy, right? It gives me a sense of place, and we all need a sense of place. And it also helps me to understand that we all need a sense of belonging. And I belong to a really beautiful community of sacred activists who are doing all kinds of service work, whether through music, through art, through ecology, through bringing dignity back into the process of birthing children and new families into the world, which is really, really important. Not just how a child is received, but how the family is received and supported by the organs of people around them as a whole body of knowledge and a whole ecosystem working together. So we're doing all of these projects. We work on festivals. We do this. So surrounding myself with wise people who are equally as imperfect as I am, but who show up in love, like you just don't even, it just breaks through the barriers and the resistance and the ego, and it just shines that truth into me. And that truth is, I'm just gonna go with my heart wherever I go, because I see it. I see what we're doing. I see all of those pockets, as Lizzy was saying, of people doing really amazing work in the world, what Christine's doing, what so many people that are really shifting. And I believe in that, and I'm investing in that. And I know that it's real, and I know it's truthful, because when I look to the left and the right of me, I'm looking at people who are doing the work, who are moving the things forward, and there's so much empowerment that comes through the trust that we're all in it together.
When I look back at the women in my line, there are 2 generations between me and my great-grandmother, Valeska. And that generation went through World War II in a really brutal way in Germany. And there was the experience of watching all their husbands and sons kill and be killed. And the numbing that came around that. The only person, the woman in my family line who could hold herself was my great-grandmother. She was the only one who could hold love through the generational trauma that happened from that war, which still lived in my mother, and she, and she acted out around that, and then it lived in her murder and in my experience as a child. And at some point in the last 20 years, I had the insight that all of the suffering that I'd experienced in my life came from female embodiment and from violence, and that they were deeply intertwined. And that if I could work on body peace for women, and if I could work on peace, paciencia, bad Spanish, but that if I could work on that in some way, that I would be doing worthy work. A couple of more recent things that built on that was I had an NDE about 6 years ago. And I touched into that realm that's above the body, and made a choice, a conscious choice, to come back. I love life. I love this life. And at that time, I had a concurrent experience that the mission, the opportunity at this time alive in a woman's body, at this time on earth, is unprecedented in the last many thousands of years. The idea that we're up here, that we're collected, that we're talking about these things, that we have the money to fund our own programming, that we have, that we're doing this, that we're voting. 100 years ago, they weren't even voting in many, 102 years? What? Well, you couldn't even vote. And 50 years ago, you couldn't even buy a house in your own name. These are ridiculous recent changes. And people have been up on this stage in the week that have said things that I've disagreed with, what a shitty time to be alive. I'm like, it is not. It is amazing to be alive right now. We have, for the first time, the opportunity to really use our voices and make a change and say, you know what, if it was 50-50 in every legislature, in every diocese, in every parish, in, wherever, if it was 50-50, we would not be sending our sons to war to kill each other. We would not be raising them to kill each other. And this movement became the rebalancing of the feminine and the masculine in human culture, like it is in the rest of organic nature. And when I hear that voice, when I hear, I've equated it with a feminine deity or a goddess voice, because I don't know how else to say it, that as long as I'm doing that work, I will be resourced. I thank her. That's what inspires me.
Thank you so much for being with me. This particular topic is near and dear to my heart. If you read my book, Reverence, it focuses a lot on how do we reclaim our place as part of the web of life. I have a lot of stuff on my personal blog at xtinem.com that speak to spiritual ecology and right relationship with Earth. So thank you for joining me. May you live in beauty, harmonious connection, and the depth of awareness of yourself as totally natural and perfect since the day you were born and even now. All love.